Okay, good. 305. Welcome, folks. This is our last presentation, our last talk of the day. I hope you found today useful, and you found some things to help you in your practices as lean practitioners and leaders and so on. We're going to have a great talk from Maria from University of Calgary and Tim from Lean Agility, who've done some great things together with the staffing with a staffing process or hiring process at the University of Calgary. But before that, I'm just going to share just a quick overview of some of the training that is coming up in the next little while. I'm just going to give you a quick little heads up on what the different training programs are, and so you can see what they are. This is there's a leader white belt, which is basically kind of an intro to lean for leaders, so they get what lean's about. They can figure out how to get rid of some wastes. It's done in Microsoft Teams, and it uses that virtual simulation I mentioned earlier. June 13 and October 20th. The next one's white belt, which is the intro to lean for team members. June 9, September 5, December 5th. There are links. This document will post this document for you. There's links to these events. Yellow belts, 3 days. How to improve a simple process. We've got we're working on a new simulation actually, which is like a staffing process. You actually improve that throughout the 3 days, and it teaches you how to use DMAIC and how to really optimize the human side of your transformation. And then the green belt, it's 2 4-day classroom sessions with about a month and a bit between. You learn how to become a facilitator of a moderately complex project, improve a moderately complex process. And with coaching, you do your own project as well. You graduate once you've completed the project successfully with a coach's help. And that's in September and January. And then finally, the black belt is really, we treat it like no matter where you got your training or your experience beforehand, we do an assessment with you on where you're at right now, what gaps you might have, and come up with an individualized plan to close those gaps. And that's to become somebody who could improve just about any kind of process or implement lean management in a real life organization. So we'll share that in the the Q&A or the chat with you shortly. But anyways, enough of that. We're gonna do our last talk of the day, which is Tim and Maria are going to talk about this experience of a project at the University of Calgary that has some very ambitious goals in terms of being a top service experience kind of organization, academic institution, and they're going to share the kind of story, the case study of a really cool staffing process that they've done together. So I will turn it over to both Tim and Maria to take us through their story, and we'll have a quick wrap up at the very end after this. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Craig. I am going to share my screen. It's my plan, and we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, it's without incident. All right, so you should now be seeing my screen, which is a presentation. Did, however, lose my my window. So I'll bring you back. All right, you can see Maria. It says I'm sharing my screen. So I'll take it at its word. I can't see what I'm sharing, so I'll have to use my imagination. So Craig, wonderful. Thank you for the introduction. As Craig said, we are going to be talking about work that happened at the University of Calgary, and Maria was the project lead for this work. I'm going to let her speak for herself. Credit where credit's due. This is going to make it sound like we're really good, which we are. But most of the success should probably be credited to the team and the fantastic work that they did. So, by way of introduction, my name is Timothy Francis, and as Craig mentioned, I work with Lean Agility. I've become something of an HR person, very much unintentionally, but there are worse things to be in the world, I think, than an HR person, and other corporate services as well as strategic planning. Prior to Lean Agility, I was with INFC, Infrastructure Canada, working in their HR branch, and before that at Veterans Affairs. And I see some colleagues from Infrastructure and Veterans Affairs here today. So wonderful to see you folks again. Maria,
Okay,
tell us about yourself.
I will. Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Chirico. I'm a continuous improvement specialist in the people and culture function at the University of Calgary. I've worked in the HR area for about 15 years. And relatively early in my career at the university, I was fortunate to be able to work on a really large scale cross-functional project that involved some major process changes tied to the expansion of our HRIS system. That provided some invaluable experience for me, and I think as a result of that, I sort of caught the process improvement bug, as so to speak, and since then, a lot of my work has been focused on improving processes in one form or another. But I'm a relative newbie to Lean, I guess you could say. I completed my green belt through Lean Agility early in 2024. Thank you, Ken. And since that time, I've been partnering with teams across the portfolio to help with continuous improvement initiatives. Providing facilitation and support, tracking, and really just trying to foster more of a lean culture within our function. But again, being sort of early in my lean journey, I was very excited to be able to partner with Tim on this project. So that's me.
Thanks, Maria. So if you were lucky enough to attend Francois' talk this morning from EDC, one of the things he said that resonated with me, some of us spend our entire career fighting fires and flying by the seat of our pants, but maybe it doesn't have to be that way. And similarly, what if there was a better way? One of the themes that we've heard throughout today is visibility. And so one of the things that made this project really exciting to work on, we're going to get to it momentarily, is the degree of visibility from the highest level of the organization down to the level of the folks who were doing the work. So I want us to sort of watch for that. It is about shining a light. So we're going to be talking about value stream mapping specifically. One of the things that Alain said in his talk that was a takeaway for me was that leaders can sometimes default to the things that they can see. And so some of their tools are things like reorgs, shaking up resources, reallocation of resources, things that they've done before. So the value stream map that we'll see as promised is going to give them a new level of visibility and help them connect from this operational level activities to the strategic level. So watch for that. It's exciting. And then one of the other things that the team did at Calgary that was astonishing, that I think addresses some of the things I heard in other workshops today, was the idea of how we drive change up to our leadership. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to turn it over to Maria to draw this line from the highest strategic levels of the university to the project that we worked on.
Yeah. Okay, so in 2023, the University of Calgary launched its updated strategic plan titled Ahead of Tomorrow, and outlining basically our foundational commitments. And I'm going to highlight specifically strategy 4, which is to make our processes clearer, simpler, and better than any other university. So a pretty bold statement, as you can see. We were used to seeing the strategic focus be more on research and teaching excellence as well as community impact, because those are all part of sort of the core mission of a university. But this was the first time that we saw focus on operational excellence at that level. And that was really exciting, I think, for staff who could now see that direct line of sight to a key strategy. And it really helped to lay the groundwork for an organizational commitment on a process improvement, really at all levels. So the question, I guess, was, what were we going to tackle first? The process to hire faculty members at the university was one that had been on our radar for a while. As you can imagine, recruiting and hiring top tier faculty is a critical function of a university, and it's part of our core business, right? Teaching and research, and we need those top faculty members to be able to do that. So establishing and maintaining effective processes to support faculties in doing that was essential. But what we saw was that while processes to support hiring of staff had really evolved over the years, and we'd seen, a lot of process and system improvements put in place, the same wasn't true of our process to hire faculty. It had remained more or less unchanged and was almost entirely manual, if not for the pandemic. I will say that forced a little bit of change in terms of making making it work to support virtual work. But really, if it wasn't for that, we were still shuffling paper files, using wet signatures and so on. So there was a lot of room for improvement. And so while there was a commitment to take advantage of system automation long term, but there was an understanding that first we needed to focus on improving the process, right? No one wanted to automate a bad process. So we had support at the VP level, both on the HR side as well as our provost to tackle this initiative. And for those who maybe aren't familiar with university leadership, a provost is also referred to as our vice president academic. So they're essentially our senior administrative officer when it comes to the academic matters. So all of the deans report into the provost, and ultimately she's accountable for academic hiring as well as many other things, of course. So it was about a year ago that we initiated conversations with Lean Agility to engage them to support us as we tackled this process, and I was really thrilled to be able to work alongside Tim on this. So we knew at the outset some of the key problems, or we thought we knew, that the process was slow and error prone, and that it was not clearly defined or understood. There was really a lack of role clarity across the stakeholders. And there was a lot of confusion that was resulting from just a complete lack of visibility into the process. Some big problems to solve. So where we started, we had to get some visibility into how our clients and stakeholders were experiencing the process. So we started with voice of the client interviews and focus groups to really help validate our assumptions. We met with the provost office and other impacted senior leaders, with deans and department heads who are essentially responsible for hiring, and we heard from them that they were losing top candidates because of issues with the process, and there was some real concern around the reputational impacts of that. We also spoke with new faculty members who essentially confirmed our concerns around the reputational impacts, that it was adding to a really less than desirable first impression of the university. We also met with faculty administrators who are responsible for supporting deans and department heads in their through the process, and we heard a lot about sort of a lack of clarity around the process. And they, along with department heads, they really highlighted sort of that lack of visibility. And they talked about once paperwork is submitted to HR, it's like a black hole, right? They have no idea where things are at or how long it's going to take. And then, of course, we spoke with our HR and contracts team members, the central folks that help administer the process. And from their perspective, there was a lot of frustration around the errors and the omissions that they were seeing when the paperwork was coming to them. But also there seemed to be an understanding that there was sort of, everyone was so focused on their piece of the process, on just trying to get their step, from their step to the next, that they didn't necessarily realize or understand how much waiting and issues there were at other parts of the process. And that was really common sentiment among all the conversations that we had. So these discussions really helped us really define the scope of the project, that the problems seem to be focused on sort of the latter half, from when the candidates are identified through to the offer and processing of the candidates into the HR system, which then kicks off the onboarding process. So it was clear that we needed to sort of fix that. We needed to ensure that the offer and processing part were working smoothly before we turned our focus on sort of the upfront recruitment and selection piece. So we start by forming our project team with all the key members, including faculty representatives who directly support the process. It was really important for us that, again, it wasn't seen as central administration going off to fix the process, that it really was about partnering with our clients and the faculties to understand their perspective and co-create a better process. And we also provided all of the team members with lean training to ensure that they understood lean methodology and those key concepts, so that we were all speaking the same language. And then we asked that the project team commit to a 5-day in-person workshop, and then sort of ongoing commitment post workshop.
So Maria, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
We talked to all these different groups. It's hard to believe in some ways that it was a year ago. It feels like yesterday. Such is the joy of working with the University of Calgary. We talked to all these folks, and one of the things that we asked them in these voice of the client interviews is what the perfect process or what the ideal process looks like to them. And we heard from deans and faculty heads how long they wanted the process to take, or put differently, how fast they needed it to be in order to stop losing these top candidates, in order to have a better experience. What was that? What was that number?
In their world, they wanted to see the offer ready for a submission to the candidate, the formal offer, within about a week.
Within a week, okay. Yeah. And when we shared that number with the project team, how would you characterize their reaction?
Disbelief, shock. Yeah, they were concerned that would be an achievable goal for sure.
Okay. All right. So I just want folks to sort of to keep that figure in mind. We're going to, for the benefit of folks who might be less familiar with lean, or for people who want a little refresh, this is the model of the 3 principles of lean from This Is Lean, which hopefully you had a chance to discuss with Ken if you went to his talk. And we have prioritization of flow efficiency over resource efficiency, which of course we're going to see. It's not the primary focus of this talk. We're going to see a lot more about the visible process performance. So everyone knows the score at a glance. One of the stories that I really like from This Is Lean is Taichi Ono's conversation about what makes a good soccer team, and the engineers that he's relating that he relays this question to respond like, well, you need good kickers and good defense, and he says, more critically, more foundationally, you need to know where the other players on your team are. You need to know where on the field you are. You need to know where the ball is, and you need to have a shared goal, an understanding of where the goalposts are. So I said earlier, this connection between the strategic vision. We want to have the best processes, faster processes. We want it to take a week, and the work that we do. That's what the visible process performance is going to get us. And the proactive learning experimentation is the how of how we're going to get there. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between a process map or a process more generally, as I understand it, and a value stream map as I understand it, and as we worked through it at the University of Calgary. So this, you will no doubt recognize, is a recipe for brownies. It's a terrible recipe for brownies, but it would likely get you where you need it to go. Okay, this is a process map. This will help you produce brownies. It doesn't capture what happens between the steps. It doesn't happen before we set foot in the kitchen in order to make the brownies. It doesn't tell us from whence the 7-inch pan that we're going to put the brownies in. In fact, this recipe is so bad, it doesn't even tell us what temperature to set the oven to. Okay, so this is a standard, in my mind, version of a process or a process map This is a value stream map, okay? So the recipe versus the reality. This is what my spouse says the kitchen looks like after I cook. So a value stream is a complete business process from end to end. It includes all the steps, value added and non-value added, required to take the product or service from the original customer to the fulfillment of that request. And it usually starts and ends with a client. Okay, we'll do a simple example, and then Maria is going to walk us through the University of Calgary process. So what we have here is the interrogation of the customer about their what they value, what kind of meat they want, cheese, bread, selection, the application of that value to an actual sandwich, whether we want it toasted, those sorts of things. At each step, we're capturing critical data about how long it takes to complete the step, if there's any waiting. And I mentioned waste. Okay, so we're going to capture the waste. We're going to capture the bottleneck that happens at the toaster. And you'll notice that my value stream maps always include happy faces and sad faces. This is a sad face. We're waiting for the toaster. Okay, here's another sad face. They accidentally put pickles on. The sandwich has to go back in the process to be remade. Finally, there's an exhausted mise en place, and the sandwich artist has to go to the back of the restaurant to obtain freshly sliced tomatoes. Okay, so value stream map, business process end to end, all the steps, both value add and non-value add. We want to see the waste. We want to make it visible, because if we can't see it, we can't fix it. Maria, would you be so kind as to walk us through the mess of Post-its that we see before us?
Okay, so as Ken shows, as we're used to, you see swim lanes. Each role's given a swim lane, and we map the steps of the process as with any process map. And so this helps to show who's responsible for each step. But where this differs is it includes all of the redundant parts of the process and all of the back and forth, making that piece visible. And even more importantly is this is where we collected all those critical data measures. So the processing time, elapsed time at each step, the accuracy, right, which was critical. What percentage of time are we actually seeing the information coming into that step that was complete and accurate? So this gave us visibility into the process that we were missing. And it was transformative, because this was a process that had been for so long, I would say, shrouded in mystery. A lot of people only knew their little piece of the process. So seeing it laid out like this, with all of, the good and the bad was so important. And like I said, we had mapped the processes in the past, but not all of the in-betweens, as Tim mentioned. So really helped to provide a lot more clarity. I'll take you through the process at a high level to give you a sense of what we were dealing with. So the first section we titled Finalizing the Offer. So this has to do with the dean approving the recommendation from the selection committee, and then negotiating with the candidate and obtaining any additional approvals that they need to at that stage. And of course, there's variability, but on average, say about 25 days. The request for offer step sort of kicks off once the candidate accepts the verbal offer, and that involves the faculty administrator gathering all the documentation that they need to submit to HR. And on average, it was taking about 5 days to gather that information. The next step was preparing the offer. So this is HR receiving and validating the submission, drafting the offer, various levels of approvals, review and approvals. So an average of about 10 days here. This is where we started to see a lot of back and forth between this and the previous step, gathering that information, because the faculties really were not set up to really consistently send complete packages, which was causing a lot of back and forth. Some other, we discovered that the contract production at this step was actually relatively quick. But then it was sitting pending faculty approval. And then at the next step, executing the offer is where, again, more review and approval. So this is the provost review and approval of the contract, and then the candidate receiving and accepting the formal offer, which was taking about 20 days. And then finally, the processing of the hire. So this is the final documentation coming into HR for processing, which was taking about an average of about 12 days. So when we talk about this black hole, we're talking about basically from the preparing the offer through to processing the hire. There was no visibility into where the hire was at. And from the perspective of, what the departments and the leaders were asking for, it was these 2 points of time, right? They wanted from when the candidate accepts the verbal offer to when they receive the formal offer. That measure was taking between 6 to 7 weeks. So obviously not a great experience for those involved. The end-to-end process, about 72 days. So this process really helped us have a few really important realizations, and one of them was around the different perspectives of time, because, like I said, for the heads, the clock were those 2 points, the candidate touch points. And that was about 6 to 7 weeks. But for HR, the clock wasn't really starting. They didn't know the clock had started. For them, the clock hadn't started until they received the complete paperwork, and that was taking about 5 to 10 additional days of back and forth to collect that information. So that really helped for, I think, a perspective shift in terms of a realization that we need to do something to help to support our clients in order for that to increase the accuracy on that first submission, so that we can get rid of some of this back and forth.
Okay, so key takeaway for me there was definitely the sort of the discovery that when people were saying the process was taking too long, was that they were talking about from when they had made the offer until when it was when they thought it should have been finalized. From HR's perspective, the clock hadn't even started for a couple of weeks. So that critical key piece. Maria's going to walk you through 3 experiments. I mentioned the proactive problem-solving approach that we were going to take. She's going to walk you through 3 experiments, and the first one on the next, the first one on the next slide, I'll just close this antivirus warning. Hopefully it's not real. Our teams will spontaneously decide that now is the time to update. The first experiment that she's going to walk you through is one of the ones that I referenced, where absolutely brilliant opportunity that Calgary leveraged to take the idea of staff and to push it up in a really useful way that helped leaders make great decisions. So I'll let her walk you through.
that. Yeah. So the first experiment we refer to as the guardrails. So when there are items included in an offer that are not considered standard, a dean has to obtain approval from the provost on those items. And so what that meant is that the provost was approving that hire twice, once for non-standard items and then again at the final contract. And for a lot of people, this was something that was, it's up to the provost. The provost is going to decide what's standard and non-standard. That's not really our bag. But we decided to do a thorough analysis of all the hires over the last year, including details on any non-standard items that had been included in the offer. And this was data that had not been gathered in the past, because again, as I said, this process was so manual. There was it wasn't something that that anyone had been able to pull together, but it was necessary to really have a better understanding of what was happening. So with that data, we were able to make recommendations to the provost on changes to the non-standard list, and we included evaluation of any associated risks with those recommendations. And so that gave the provost, as Tim mentioned, the information that she needed to make a decision. And she ended up accepting all of our recommendations, and in fact even took a step farther than we had laid out. So from an impact perspective, we're just sort of coming into the busy period of academic hiring, so it's still sort of early days, but so far we've seen a 75% reduction in non-standard requests as a result of these changes. So from the perspective of time, I mean, that's translating to an average of about, say, 8 emails, right, back and forth, a minimum of at least 5 days of elapsed time, with emails going back and forth between all levels of the organization. And having that decrease of those upfront requests to the approval requests has reduced the burden on the provost office. And so, in fact, what we're also seeing is that the provost contract approval time, which was around 5 to 10 days in the past, is now about 4 days. And in fact, for about 70% of the requests, it's closer to 2 days. So a huge difference from that perspective, which is not necessarily one we had anticipated. So anecdotally, the feedback from the deans has been that these updated non-standards give them not only more clarity, but it's strengthening their negotiating power, it just makes the process go that much smoother.
Right. So that is to say that they sort of in the old way, a candidate would have in the verbal negotiations would have said, well, in addition to that, I'd also like this, and the dean would say, well, let me go check with the boss, and they would have to then check with the boss, and the boss would say, okay, because in practice the boss wasn't really saying no to very much. And so there was the perspective on the team, bless them, it's not their fault, the team was amazing, that were sort of, the attitude was a little bit like, well, if the provost didn't want to review these, she would tell us, and then, you know, we could stop sending them to her, but if we need to hear from her. And so the team put this together, highlighted the associated risks, and put it up. Is just, I think, the most powerful, one of the most powerful lessons from today is, if you're wondering how to get traction with your leaders, make a recommendation, show that you've put in the thought. And in this case, the provost surprised the team by not only accepting the recommendations, but taking them to a step further. And the deans happy with the result, because now they're in a meeting with the candidate, and they know what they're allowed, what they, you know, sort of what they'd have to go and ask for additional permissions for. So I think that was a huge empowering win for the team. Sorry to go on about it. I just think it's really special.
It was, and actually one of the other piece of anecdotal feedback I'll share is that we actually had one of our administrators say that when the dean found out about these changes, they did a little dance. It's just like not something that we hear deans doing on a regular basis. So it was that impactful. It was pretty cool to hear that. Okay, the next experiment was around visibility. So we discovered during the value stream mapping exercise that several groups had been managing their own tracking tool for their part of the process. So it was clear that there would be value in a centralized tool. So that's exactly what we did. We created a tool that tracks the status of hires, which is maintained by the central people and culture teams that support the process, but it's accessible to all of the key contacts in the faculties, the provost's office, as well as others across the university who need this information. And so essentially what we created a pull system of information so that clients can now access the status of hires on demand. So creating this common tool helped to create alignment across the teams and reduce duplication. So, you know, the tracker is manual, but it really involved no extra work for the central groups because they were already maintaining their own tracker. It just, again, expanded it to include more of the process, which made it more useful for everyone. So from an impact perspective, the team is seeing about 90% reduction in the number of status updates that they're receiving. And this is where, you know, this is part of our eliminating the black hole, as they say, and reducing all those emails and asking where things were at. And the results of this were pretty immediate. Within the first 24 hours, we actually saw an influx of some missing details that had associated on some sort of outstanding hires that had been sitting pending the faculties, and having that visibility, helped them to action things a lot quicker. We also added some critical information to the tracker, HR related information like position numbers and job ID numbers, the type of information that's required when they submit paperwork. So it made it easier for the faculty administrators to have sort of a single place to be able to go to pull that information. And then we also set up the tracker to have a counter in the background so that we could track the time through the process, which is not something that we had before. We had really little visibility in terms of real metrics, in terms of the time through the process. So that's been also a really great outcome of this one. The feedback from the admins is that having that on-demand status update, the ability to get those status updates allowed them, of course, to provide more timely updates to their leaders, saves them time and allows them to be more proactive. So really great impact there as well. And then finally, the third one was around our approach to creating tools to help improve the submission package. So I mentioned that the focus of the team was what can we do to support our clients to have a more complete submission package and reduce all that back and forth. So what they did was create resources for leaders. And that included a verbal offer checklist, as well as some other targeted resources to support the negotiation and offer process. So the checklist was a relatively simple tool, just providing some clear and concise information on the process and with sort of some flexibility built in, so faculties could customize it for their own needs. But all of it put together to support them to have a more fulsome conversation with candidates during the negotiation process. And at the same time, the team also revised and amalgamated the forms that we use for the hiring process. They combined 2 forms into one, as well as made a lot of adjustments to the content. So from an impact perspective, leaders were able to enter into the negotiation with greater confidence. They felt more well prepared, and the candidates were receiving a more comprehensive offer information and details, and really adding to sort of the overall enhancement of their experience as well. And it also provided and ensured that leaders had considered some key nuances as part of the process, and we're sharing them as part of sort of the administration of the process to help to reduce some of that back and forth that was happening later in the process. From the perspective of the forms, the focus was really on collecting only the information that we needed and removing any of that data that was being gathered that could be gathered from other sources. And then also they embedded checklists into the form that really clearly outlined the supporting documentation that was required, as well as some extensive help documentation to help for those people that are new to the process and needed those additional details. And so far, what we've seen is that the complete and accurate percentage at submission has increased from about 30% to 90%. Which again just means a lot less time chasing information for both the central groups and the faculties. I will say, of course, as with all process change, there's always sort of early and late adopters. So there's still a couple of outliers, but I think overall, I think the data is showing that overwhelmingly that the changes are going to be really positive. And again, because of sort of the stage that we're at in the recruitment cycle, it's still relatively preliminary because there's only a few data or a few hires that have gone through the process start to finish. But the early indicators are that the process is looking a lot shorter. So previously, the time between submission of a request to, again, the offer going to the candidate was about 6 to 7 weeks. And so far, the average is closer to about 3.5 weeks. And in fact,
so
oh, yeah. Yeah.
So a 50% reduction, and not counting the increased facility with which the requests are submitted in the first place.
Yeah. And then we have had about 8 files of 40 some odd that were actually 7 days or less, that were in line with what the department heads had initially requested, which, you know, a lot of the team felt was not possible when they initially heard it. So so exciting to see that was in fact possible.
So the team achieved the impossible, and is closer every day to sustaining that change and making sure it's all files that are touch wood are ideally being processed that quickly. But I think so. So some of the changes are incomplete and accurate percentage, which is wonderful to see that number from 30%, or 1 out of 3 files that comes in, we have to send back because it's not ready to be processed, and that's now only 10% of files that are going back. Less time with back and forth, a huge decrease in the emails back and forth, less time for candidates to get in the door. The black hole relatively gone. If somebody needs to know where they are in the process, it's easy to find out. It's not additional work to track that information. It's just that all of the information has been put in a single place. And those results are all wonderful, laudable, exciting results, and hugely impressive. But what about the cultural impacts at Calgary?
Yeah, and this has been really amazing to see the shifts in the team. I think people are a lot more comfortable talking about problems, and committed to sort of making processes visible and understanding the importance of sort of tracking the impacts of the changes. And I think, yeah, the big one is, rather than getting stuck in this thought process that, oh, it's too complex, it's beyond our control, it's above our pay grade, there's more of a shift to say, well, you know, what can we do to impact positive change, even if it's small, and we're seeing that applied in some work that's going on in subordinate processes right now. So yeah, there seems to be sort of a new commitment to really moving those sorts of initiatives forward where we can. And then I think it just really confirmed for everyone how important, you know, it was to have the team. From the get-go, we knew it needed to be the people that were intimate with the process, that really understood at least their part of it, even if they didn't necessarily understand the entire process, that they're best positioned to do that work. But it really sort of brought that home. And I remembered a speaker from last year's summit, Alan Robertson, talked about, he was the author of Practical Innovation in Government, and he talked about how, you know, especially in the public sector, the most impactful change is driven by frontline leaders, not management driven. And those changes can often be small and low risk, but over time, those are the ones that add up and really make the difference. And I think that's sort of really hit home with these changes. It's been, yeah, really impactful from that perspective, for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Maria. Thanks everybody for listening to our talk. Again, kudos and credit due to where credit is due, which is to the team, yeah, who committed to not only the workshop, which was inspired similar reactions to the idea that we would be delivering, yeah, these at 5, you know, taking 5 days away from their jobs to focus on this. It seemed radical at the time, but they did it, and they really stepped up, and we saw them stepped up, and these are the results of those folks putting in the time and the hard work.
Thank you, Tim and Maria. Fantastic story, great case study, and you know, successful application of Lean, and great great results. So I'm really happy for you. I'm sure, Maria, you're very proud of what you've accomplished, and I hope your colleagues are happy with it too. It sounds like they are.
Or the team, yeah, they've done an amazing work. So it's really, yeah, it's great.
So I would encourage those who are watching, listening, participating. You can't turn on your microphones and or cameras. So we're experimenting with this sort of new town hall format. But you can ask questions, and you can do that through the Q&A function. So if you have questions, I'd love it if you could type a question in the Q&A. If there's a lot of questions, we can upvote them and see what happens. But yeah, any questions for Tim or Maria on how they made this project work or anything related to that? We'd love to hear it.
Ken, while we're waiting for folks to put some questions in the chat, I have a question for Maria, which is, I love the retro. People who know me know that I love a good retro. What would you do differently if you had this project to do over again?
I wish I would have seen Alain's presentation on shielding the team before. I mean, it was something that I know we talked about, but I think if we could have done a better job in terms of really allowing people to dedicate more of their time to this versus it being off the sides of their desk. They were really vulnerable to things being thrown at them, shifting priorities, and then things took a lot longer than I think that it could have happened otherwise. And I feel like people, were almost getting to the point where they were starting to feel a bit burned out just by the sheer what was coming at them. So yeah, that would be a part that I would definitely want to talk to leadership about how we can do a better job of that on future projects.
There's a question in the chat. There's a couple now, and can you folks see them? Or I can just read them out to you.
No. Erica's asking, congratulations on the project. She says, did you complete the full project in the 5 days, which would have been incredible. The 5-day workshop, basically what it was we mapped the process, we did the analysis, root cause analysis, and we generated solutions, and we made A3s. Great talk this morning on A3s. I hope you didn't miss it. We did A3s for those solutions, and then the team took away from that, and we huddled weekly on the progress of the solutions. And that was in May of last year that the workshop happened. And then we did a second workshop relating to a bunch of subordinate processes in October.
Yeah.
So the team has been very very busy.
Yeah, there's a few other questions. I'll let you pick which ones you want to address.
Maria, I can't answer this one. When you consider all the rework waste that was saved from the new process, what has the team been able to reinvest their reclaimed time into?
I think, as Tim mentioned, we're looking at some of those subordinate processes now, and there's still some work related to this initiative that's still underway. We're looking at the templates that we use for offers. I mean, there's a lot of that still going on, and hopefully soon we'll be starting to look at transitioning this to look into sort of the system solutions and how we can transition the process into the system and find additional opportunities for efficiency.
Okay. There's 2 more questions, and if we're strategic, I think we can answer them both in the next before we turn it back to Craig.
Sure.
Joe Walters is asking, when the main type of waste that you revealed, what did we see in our processes, and was it the case of files moving up and down the hierarchy?
Yeah, so the back and forth. The waste was around the omissions, errors at submissions, and not just at the submission of the paperwork, but even when with the administrators trying to pull the submission together, they were having to run around all over the place to try and gather this data. So it was throughout the process, and even part of the review steps. A lot of issues around omissions and people just not understanding the requirements.
A lot of defects, a lot of excessive
Yes.
processing.
For sure.
And then Anthony is asking, how did you come up with your proactive experiments?
That was through the work of the group on sort of the solutioning within the workshop. We decided once we sort of identified the root causes, we talked about solutions and prioritized them, and those were the ones that sort of rolled to the top of the list.
Yeah, so it was a brainstorm that the team undertook, the team who had done the analysis, and we also vetted those ideas with leaders before we did too much work developing them. And the people doing the work did a fantastic job of letting us know how it could be improved.
Yeah.
So I tried to launch a poll, like I mentioned before. We're sort of experimenting with this format, so I'm not sure if those in the audience can actually access the link I put in the Q&A, but give it a try. Otherwise, we'll solicit your feedback in some other way. Craig's now here. He's going to wrap up the day.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken. Thank you, Maria. Awesome work. So great to see what you folks have done. It isn't always easy in academia to make those kind of changes, but you've proven it can be done, and you've got some great momentum.